Something just happened. And at first glance, it looks like a solution, but the deeper you look, the more it starts to feel like something else entirely. Iran's foreign minister just landed in St. Petersburg, a high-level meeting with Vladimir Putin, and within hours, Russia confirmed something critical. The offer is still on the table. Russia is ready to take custody of Iran's enriched uranium. Now, on paper, this solves everything. It removes the most dangerous material. It lowers the risk of escalation. It creates a diplomatic off-ramp. So here's the real question. If a solution exists, why does this crisis still feel like it's moving forward instead of ending? Because what you're about to see isn't just diplomacy, it's strategy. The perfect solution. Let's start with the obvious. The biggest issue in the Iran nuclear standoff right now is simple: enriched uranium. We're talking about hundreds of kilograms enriched to levels that bring it dangerously close to weapons grade. And for months, the core demand from Washington has been clear. That material needs to be removed. Not reduced, not paused, removed. Now suddenly, Russia steps in with an offer that checks almost every box. Take the uranium out of Iran, store it in Russia, process it under international supervision. No strikes, no escalation, no immediate conflict. Even organizations like the International Atomic Energy Agency could oversee the process. And here's the important part. This isn't a new idea. A very similar system worked before under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Back then, most of Iran's uranium stockpile was shipped out, and yes, it went to Russia. So when you look at it purely on the surface, this feels like a ready-made solution, which is exactly why what happened next becomes so important. The rejection that changes everything. Because despite all of that, the proposal wasn't accepted. Now here's where most coverage stops. But this is where things actually begin. The United States didn't reject the goal. It rejected the method. Removing uranium? Yes. Russia handling it? No. And that small distinction changes the entire equation. Because now this is no longer just about nuclear safety. It's about control. If Russia takes custody of Iran's uranium, it doesn't just reduce risk. It gains influence. Russia, through entities like Rosatom, already plays a major role in the global nuclear fuel market. Handling Iran's material would expand that position even further. So, from Washington's perspective, this isn't just a technical solution, it's a strategic trade-off. Reduce one risk, while potentially strengthening a rival. And suddenly, the perfect solution doesn't look so simple anymore. What Iran is really doing now, shift your focus to Iran. Because Iran's move here is not random, and it's definitely not reactive, it's calculated. Instead of waiting, instead of escalating rhetoric, instead of publicly rejecting pressure, Iran chooses a different path. It engages, directly, by sending its foreign minister to meet Vladimir Putin in person. And that detail matters more than it seems. Because in geopolitics, where you go and who you meet sends a message long before any official statement is released. This isn't routine diplomacy. This is positioning. Iran understands something very clearly. If one door doesn't open, you don't stand in front of it forever. You walk to another door and make sure everyone sees you do it. Because when the United States signals that it won't accept Russia as the handler of Iran's uranium, that doesn't eliminate the proposal. It simply shifts the center of gravity. The conversation doesn't stop. It moves. And right now, it's moving toward Moscow. That's why this meeting matters. Iran isn't just discussing technical details. It's shaping perception. It's reinforcing a narrative that a workable solution already exists, that it's not theoretical, that it's not years away. It's real, structured, and ready to move forward. And most importantly, it's being actively explored, just not by everyone. That distinction is subtle, but powerful, because it changes how the global audience sees the situation. Instead of Iran appearing isolated or resistant, it starts to look engaged, flexible, willing to negotiate, just not on every term. And that gives Iran something extremely valuable: leverage. Because when you can point to a solution and say, "We're open to this," You shift pressure away from yourself and onto the side that's hesitating. Now add another layer. By physically showing up in Russia, Iran is doing more than diplomacy. It's creating visibility. This isn't happening quietly behind closed doors in some undisclosed location. This is public, deliberate, visible to allies, rivals, and global markets. It's a signal to everyone watching. The mechanism exists, the discussions are real, and progress is possible, but not guaranteed. And that uncertainty, that gap between possible and happening, that's where Iran gains strategic space. Because in that space, time works differently. Pressure shifts, narratives evolve, and negotiations become less about demands and more about choices. So what you're seeing right now isn't just Iran responding to a situation. It's Iran shaping it, carefully, quietly, and in a way that makes one thing very clear. This isn't a deadlock. It's a repositioning. And Iran is making sure it's not standing still while everyone else decides what happens next. The silent players. Now let's add another layer. Because this situation isn't just about 3 countries. There's another major player here, and it's not saying much at all. China. No loud statements. No dramatic announcements. No urgent press conferences. Just silence. But in geopolitics, silence doesn't mean absence. Sometimes it means control. Because while others are making visible moves, meetings, proposals, public positioning, China is doing something far more subtle. It's shaping the environment behind the scenes, and that influence is built on something very concrete: energy. China has long-standing economic ties with Iran, especially in the energy sector. It continues to purchase Iranian oil, providing a steady flow of revenue that helps stabilize Iran's economy under pressure. That alone changes the equation, because when a country under sanctions still has a reliable buyer, it gains time. And time, in situations like this, is one of the most valuable assets you can have. But it doesn't stop there. China also maintains active diplomatic coordination, not just with Iran, but with Russia and international institutions like the International Atomic Energy Agency, which means it's not outside the process. It's connected to every major channel that matters, and yet it chooses not to dominate the headlines. That's not hesitation, that's strategy, because by staying in the background, China avoids becoming the focal point of pressure or criticism. It doesn't need to own the solution, it just needs to make sure the environment evolves in a way that aligns with its interests. And right now, that environment has a very specific characteristic. It allows Iran to wait. Think about that for a second. If Iran were completely isolated, economically and diplomatically, the pressure to act quickly would be overwhelming. Decisions would be rushed, concessions would come faster. But that's not the situation here. With China maintaining economic engagement and Russia offering diplomatic pathways, Iran isn't cornered. It has space, and that space changes everything. Because when you're not forced to act immediately, you can be selective. You can choose when to engage, when to delay, and when to push for better terms. That's where time transforms into leverage. And this is the part many people overlook. Negotiations aren't just shaped by what's said at the table. They're shaped by the conditions around the table. Who feels pressure? Who can afford to wait? Who benefits from delay? Right now, China's quiet role is helping define those conditions. Not by making bold moves, but by ensuring stability where it matters most. Energy flows continue, economic links remain intact, diplomatic channels stay open, and as long as those elements are in place, the urgency shifts. So while the spotlight is on meetings in Moscow and decisions in Washington, China is influencing the pace of the entire situation without stepping into the spotlight. It's present without appearing present, and that's what makes it so effective. Because in a moment where every visible move is being analyzed, the most important influence might be coming from the player saying the least. And in this case, that silence is not passive, it's strategic. The real paradox. Now here's where everything comes together. On the surface, the situation looks almost straightforward. The United States wants the uranium gone. Russia offers a way to remove it. Iran signals it's open to discussing that pathway. Three positions that seem like they should connect. And yet, the deal doesn't move forward. So the obvious question is, why? Because this isn't just about solving a problem. It's about who controls the solution. And that distinction changes everything. In theory, removing the uranium should be a shared goal. It reduces risk, lowers tensions, and creates space for diplomacy. But in reality, how that goal is achieved matters just as much as whether it's achieved. If Russia becomes the country that takes custody of Iran's uranium, it doesn't just help resolve a crisis. It strengthens its global position. It gains influence in nuclear energy markets, expands its diplomatic leverage, and positions itself as a central player in one of the most sensitive geopolitical issues in the world. From Washington's perspective, that's not a neutral outcome. At the same time, Iran has its own calculations. It's not just deciding whether to give up enriched uranium. It's deciding to whom, under what conditions, and with what guarantees. Trust, control, and long-term implications all come into play. So now, instead of one shared objective, you have three different strategic priorities layered on top of each other, and that creates a paradox. Because the more each side tries to protect its own position, the harder it becomes to find common ground. Every solution comes with trade-offs. Every agreement creates a winner and a perceived loser. And when those trade-offs feel too significant, even a workable solution can stall. So instead of resolution, you get delay. And that delay isn't neutral. It carries real consequences. Tensions remain elevated. Uncertainty continues to shape decision-making. Global markets react, often unpredictably, and critical trade routes like the Strait of Hormuz stay under pressure, where even small disruptions can have outsized global effects. Energy prices fluctuate, shipping risks increase, and countries far removed from the core issue still feel the impact. But the most important consequence is this: the core issue, the uranium, doesn't move. It stays exactly where it is, unchanged, unresolved, and still central to the crisis. That's what makes this moment so complex, because from the outside it can look like inaction, like hesitation, like a failure to agree, but underneath, it's something else. It's a balancing act between competing interests, where every step forward requires someone to give up more than they're comfortable with. And until that balance shifts, until one side decides the cost of delay is greater than the cost of compromise, this paradox remains in place, a situation where a solution exists but can't move forward, not because it doesn't work, but because of what it changes. What if this isn't meant to end quickly? Now here's the question most people aren't asking. What if this situation isn't broken? What if it's functioning exactly as intended for some players? Think about it. For Russia, higher energy prices can mean higher revenues. For China, continued access to Iranian energy under flexible conditions. For Iran, leverage in negotiations and time to maneuver. And for the United States, maintaining pressure without immediate escalation. So instead of a simple conflict moving toward resolution, what you may actually be looking at is a system where multiple players are benefiting from the current state of uncertainty. Not equally, not openly, but enough to slow things down, and that changes how you interpret everything. The decision point. So where does this go next? There are really only a few paths forward. 1. The United States revisits the Russian mechanism, possibly with stricter conditions. 2. An entirely new solution appears, one that doesn't currently exist. Or 3. The situation continues as it is, slow, tense, unresolved. And here's the key detail: every day without a decision is still a decision, because it allows the current balance to continue. And that balance is shaping the future of this crisis in real time. So when you see headlines about meetings, about proposals, about offers on the table, look deeper. Because this isn't just about uranium, it's about leverage, it's about timing, and it's about who gets to shape the outcome. Right now, the solution isn't missing, it's visible, it's structured, it's waiting. The real question is, Who is willing to accept the cost that comes with it? And until that answer becomes clear, this story isn't ending anytime soon.